I'm going to show you how to make your first project using your Cricut. We're going to make sticker labels to pop onto the front of containers or boxes, and I'm going to use these ones to help me tidy up my kitchen. I'm going to be using the Cricut Maker 3. Let's begin by making our text. Firstly, open Cricut Design Space and click on New Project in the top right hand corner. We're then going to start fresh and click on Blank Canvas on the left hand side. You should now see a fresh new canvas to work on. On the left hand side you'll see all of your tab options, and we want to click on Text. This will open up a text box. We can then easily change the text to say whatever we want it to say. I want to write a few different words, so I'm going to start with pasta. If you click on the text box you'll be able to see the dimensions at the top. I'm going to duplicate the text quickly just so I can show you a couple of examples. If you click on your text, you can copy and paste as you would usually do on your computer, or you can use the plus sign on the right hand side to duplicate. At this point, it's a good idea to measure the space you have to put your label onto so we know what we're working with. To change the size of the text, we have a few options. The first is to go to the menu bar at the top and manually input the size, or use the up and down arrows. I only tend to do this if I have a few different text boxes and know the exact size I'm working with. Otherwise, you can simply click on the corner squares around your text and pull out to change the size. I either use this or I go to the menu bar and type in under the W and H in the size section. A quick note here is that the padlock will keep the text in proportion and change the width as you change the height or vice versa. If you click on the padlock you will unlock the padlock and then type in either the width or the height, and Design Space will only change that one dimension. I don't want to use that option for right now though. I'm just going to make the width 6 centimeters long. Let's look at fonts. A little tip is to duplicate your text a few times so you can see the difference between the fonts. I also like to move the text to the right hand side so that you can see the fonts change while you're looking at them. Click on your text again and you should now see the option for font on the top left. If you click the down arrow, all of your options will be shown. It's worth noting here that I pay for a Cricut Access subscription and so have a lot of extra options available. These ones are shown with the green A next to them. You can either search for a font by scrolling, or you can type in a specific element that you're looking for in the search bar, or you can click on the pre-made tabs like a vintage. I usually do a mixture of all these options. I know for this one I want something swirly and clear to read. I also want something not too thin, as that could be harder to cut. I tend to change the top word until I find one I like and then move on to the second. I keep going until I've settled on a font I like. Now this stage always takes me the longest of all of the stages, but it's really worth getting it right. If you find a text you like, it's always a good idea to bookmark it by clicking on the little bookmark at the end of the font box. You can then easily look through all of the ones you've bookmarked in the past by using the tab at the top. Of all of the texts I've looked at so far, I like Bayamo. Once you've settled on one, you can then delete the ones you don't want by either clicking on the text and pressing backspace on the keyboard, or using the rubbish bin or trash can icon, which is on the top right hand side under the colour sync option. A tip I've learned over time for the next stage is to write in the longest word first and then duplicate that, but let me show you why. If I set one of the smaller words to the correct width, then I type in a longer word, that longer word will go over the width length that I want. You'll then have to make the font of the longest word smaller to make it fit into your 6 centimeters or equivalent dimension. You'll then need to go and change all of the other words to a different font size, which just takes longer. So let's start with the longest word and duplicate that as many times as we have labels left to make. You can then write in the correct words. This will make sure the font and font size all match for now. I personally think it looks much nicer to keep the font and font size the same rather than keeping the width the same, but of course that is personal preference. If you are super happy with your design, like 100% happy with your design, you can skip ahead to the cut stage, but if you want to learn a little bit more, I want to show you a couple of things that might help with this and future projects. The first is to make a mock-up of what your final make will look like before you press cut. As mine is going on the front face of a container, I'm going to pop the shape of the container onto Design Space in the correct dimensions. If you click on the Shapes tab on the left hand side, a lot of different options will pop up. I'm going to pick the rectangle as it's the closest shape to my container. If you hover the squares on the corner, you'll see a curved arrow. If you hold this down and move it, it'll allow you to rotate the shape. You can then click on the padlock under the size option and enter in the custom shape. Just bear in mind, if you have rotated your shape already, the width and height might need to be switched over for now. So my project here is going to be 7 by 26 centimeters. The second thing I wanted to show you is about the colour of your vinyl or project. My container is clear, so I'm going to change it to white to match the background of my canvas. Click on your shape and you should be able to see a little square the same colour of your shape just under the Operations tab. If you click on this tiny square, you will then see the colour options drop down, so you can choose the one you want. Now I want to put my label onto my shape. As I've only just added the rectangle, if I move the text across, the text will layer underneath, which means I can't see it. So now we want to right click on the shape and click Send Backwards so we can see the text. This makes it really quick and easy to see how your final make will look, and you can adjust the size of the text accordingly now. You can also change the colour of your text in the same way as above in case you are using a different coloured vinyl and want to really make your mock-up exactly the same as it will be in real life. Another way to make a mock-up of your project is to use the pre-made templates in the Templates tab, but we will talk about that in another video. For now, let's hide the rectangle as we don't want to cut the rectangle. If you click on the rectangle, you will see it highlighted on the layer section on the right hand side. If you then hover the highlighted section, you will then see an eyeball which you can click on to hide that layer. You can also unclick it to make sure that you can see the layer again. This means that you can unhide it later on by clicking on the eyeball again in case you need to use it again, but for now it just means that if it's hidden it won't be sent to cut. So for this project my vinyl is either going to be white or black, which I'll decide on shortly. Either way I can cut regardless of what is shown on the screen. The colour of your design on the screen does not have to match the colour of your vinyl in real life. Now I will say if I'm cutting something like this, I wouldn't bother necessarily changing the text colour unless I was making a mock-up design. However, if I had a more fun design, then I would change the colours, and of course I'd change the colour if cutting multiple different vinyls for one project. Let's assume for now all of your vinyl is going to be of one colour for your first make. In this instance, each word is going to be cut as one word, but you'll have many future projects where it will look like your design is one piece ready to be cut, but when you come to cut, you can see everything jumbled up. In this case, go back to Design Space, highlight everything you want to be cut as one, and click Attach on the bottom right hand side. Let's do this with all of our words. There is also a weld option, which we don't need for now, but we can talk about that again in a future video. Now before we cut, you just want to double check everything. Make sure you like the font, make sure the spelling is correct, and double check the size as well. When you're happy, let's click Make, which is the green button in the top right hand corner. A few options will come up here. For this project we will use either smart vinyl or let's just call it normal vinyl, which means you need a mat. I will show you both options. Smart vinyl will literally say it on the tube and it is a Cricut brand. It just means that you can cut without the mat. So if you're using this, click on the Without Mat option followed by Confirm. At this point, I would turn on your Cricut by opening it and pressing the On button. I do this now to make sure that the Cricut syncs to the laptop quickly when we are ready for it. When using Smart Vinyl, you'll see a very small mock-up of the Smart Vinyl pop up, which shows you the minimum length your vinyl needs to be. I tend to keep my Smart Vinyl on the roll, and so always have enough until the roll runs out, of course. Here you may want to move your text around to make sure you use your vinyl in the best way by not wasting any. You can turn the text around by clicking on it, then hovering and moving the circular arrow. For this project, I would actually leave the layout as it is, so that when it has cut, I can cut one straight line across the Smart Vinyl to use it for another day. When you're ready, you can then click Continue and your device will sync to your Cricut. When the next screen pops up, we need to tell the Cricut what it is about to cut. So for this one, we are using Smart Vinyl, and it is your choice whether you use removable or permanent Smart Vinyl. I am going to be using a mixture of both. My permanent vinyl is going to be used on the containers that are going to be kept exactly the same. So my pasta and my oats and my spaghetti will all stay exactly the same. And then I'm going to be using removable vinyl on the ones that I do change around a little bit more frequently, such as cereal. If you know you're going to keep the containers exactly the same, I would suggest using your permanent vinyl. Once you've clicked on your vinyl, you'll be given the load option. When I load the vinyl, I make sure the surface of my roll will sit on a clean surface so it doesn't pick up any dust as it rolls. I then feed the end of the vinyl, which needs to be a straight line, through the guides on either side of the Cricut. You can then press the load button, which has 2 arrows on it. The Cricut will pull through a little bit of vinyl, but not too much for this project. When the machine is happy it has enough vinyl, you are ready to cut, and this is shown by the play button flashing and Design Space telling you you're ready, in which case you can press the flashing play button. Let me quickly go back and show you the mat option. Let's go back to our Make screen and click on Mat, double check the mat size and confirm. If you have a big piece of vinyl to put on your mat, I'd leave the text as is. If you have scraps, which if you don't now you will in the future, you can measure your scraps and might find it better to rearrange the words. If you do this, double check the size of your vinyl and make sure everything will fit on it. It's time to get your mat. I cut vinyl on the green mat. You want to take your vinyl and lay it on your mat in a position that will cover your cut. For most projects, I tend to cut from the top left-hand side. Just make sure to keep your vinyl on the inside of the square, which is the sticky part of your mat. You can then use your brayer roller to go over the vinyl and make sure it's really stuck down to your mat. You can of course use your hands if you don't have a brayer roller. Once again, back in Design Space, we need to choose our material. You will then be asked to load the mat in the same way as you would be using the Smart Vinyl. A quick note here is that the mat can go 2 ways round. I tend to work in centimetres and so tend to pop my scrap vinyl on one particular side of the mat, so I always feed it through one way, but I do mix it up with other mats so that I don't just have one really worn out corner. You now need to slide your mat under the 2 guides on either side of your Cricut and press load, which has the 2 arrows on. This means that the Cricut will pull the mat through. Just make sure you have space behind the Cricut as the mat will poke through the other side. Your machine should already be set up with a fine point blade, which is perfect for this project, so when the play button flashes or Design Space tells you can, press this button. For either type of vinyl, when the cut has finished, the load button will flash again. Before you press this, it's a good idea to have a quick look and make sure your project looks like it has cut okay before unloading. I've not yet had a problem with the vinyl cutting, so I do actually just tend to press the load unload button. If using Smart Vinyl, I now prefer to use the trimmer to cut straight across the vinyl so that I can use this roll straight again for a smart cut, but then I cut across my small piece of vinyl in case I can use any of this for scraps again in the future, and usually I can. Of course you don't have to do this and you can just cut out your labels, but it will mean that you can't use your smart roll as a smart roll next time. If using a mat, a good hack is to flip the mat over and peel the mat away from the vinyl. This will stop your vinyl curling in. Now it's time to weed! With text, I always prefer to weed the inside of the letters first. If I do this, I don't accidentally lift the letters. Once you've weeded the inside, we can then do the background. I like to use the hook of the weeder to pick up the vinyl and then carefully peel it away. Hopefully everything has lifted really easily. If your text is very small, you might prefer the reverse weeding technique, which again I can show you in another video. Now we need transfer tape. Cut off a piece just big enough to fit each of your labels. You're going to take off the backing of the transfer tape and place this over your label. Use the scraper tool to really stick the text to the transfer tape. Flip it over and go again. You might have to do this quite a few times. Now it's time to attach your labels. Let's mark up your containers so we know where we're going to put the labels. Depending on what you're using your labels for and what your container looks like, you can eyeball the placement. I actually prefer to use masking tape though. I measure out just above where I want the text and put masking tape across. I check that this measures out and then looks right. I then use the masking tape as a guide for the top or the bottom of the label. When happy, take the backing off the vinyl and carefully line this up on the container. Do not press down until you are happy with the placement. When you are, attach away. I use fingers first and then the scraper tool. When you're satisfied it's stuck down, you can peel off the transfer tape followed by the masking tape and your design is complete. Of course, you'll then have to repeat this with every single label. I don't tend to seal anything like this as I know these containers will only be hand washed and this is perfect for my permanent vinyl. I wonder as we're looking at this if you can tell the difference between the permanent vinyl and the removable vinyl. The last thing you might want to do in Design Space is to save your design using the save button, but you will also be prompted to do this before your next make in case you forget. My first ever Cricut project was actually a heat press project making bags. I would love to know what you made for your first Cricut project.